Howard Tipton, Town Manager of Longboat Key, and welcome to Tip Talks. This is a regular video series on all things Longboat. And today I'm joined by Isaac Brownman, our Public Works Director, and we're going to be talking about utilities in a storm event. And we are in storm season right now. It's a hyperactive storm season is the forecast, so we're all needing to have a plan and to take this seriously. But we want to talk about it from a utilities perspective. When we have an evacuation order, we take and that's not, when we have an evacuation order, that's not taken lightly, right? Because everybody understands the impacts of people needing to leave. It's a pain, but it's done so with everybody's best interest at heart. There are a lot of things that are out of our control once we get into storm mode. Getting off the island could be one of those. Having water supply is another. And so we do receive our water from Manatee County, and our wastewater goes back to Manatee County. So Isaac, just tell us a little bit about how that works in a storm event where we might have our water turned off.
Absolutely, thank you, Tip. During a storm event, when we're preparing for a hurricane that could be impacting our area, Manatee County, who is our water supplier, is doing an analysis of what kind of storm surge could be hitting the county and the areas that are under their supply, what kind of wind speeds could it be hitting their area. And there's a certain point, a certain threshold of storm surge that's projected before the storm hits, and a wind speed that hits, that they will make the decision to turn off the water to the islands. And we are fed by Manatee County. The reason they do that is because if we do get hit, if that projection continues, and some of those lines are, say, torn off bridges, or those lines are ripped out of the ground, if they keep the system pressurized, their entire mainland supply could be drained out into the Gulf or the Bay, essentially, and they can't pressurize the rest of their system. So they will actually turn off the water to the islands before the storm will hit, usually at less than 45 miles an hour of wind, because they don't want their employees trying to turn valves and do other things in that kind of wind speed, or when there's a significant storm surge approaching. So there will be a point during a mandatory or an evacuation order that the water will be turned off. It's hard to say when, but we've asked them not to do it too soon, but also to keep their employees safe. So there will be a time where their protocol is they will shut off water to the island. Once they do that, the island is solely operating on the water that is in our 2 ground storage tanks. So we do have 2 ground storage tanks, but that supply is limited. We want to keep that water available. If we have to deal after an event with, say, a fire or some other event, our firefighters are going to need water to use to put out a fire. If we have people that don't evacuate and are using the water supply, that's less water that's available to get into a recovery mode. So it's very important to make sure everybody heeds those evacuation suggestions and orders, and that the water supply is turned off. Once we get past an event, the water's not turned on automatically. Manatee County has to assess the integrity of their system, and can they even turn the water back on. And then we're coordinating that whole time with Manatee County to see if the water can be turned back on, and if our system has any leaks that we would need to repair before it gets turned on. Simultaneous to that, we're coordinating with the city of Sarasota that if Manatee County cannot turn their water on, can we back feed from the city of Sarasota. We do have an emergency interconnect. However, that's a limited use, and it depends on their capacity and their ability to turn on that water. So there's a lot of coordination that happens pre-storm, during a storm, and after a storm recovery to see if we can even get the water back on and functional for the residents.
And the Sarasota water, I might add, is a lot more expensive.
Much more expensive. I'm glad you mentioned that. It's much more expensive. And this water isn't free. We buy all this water, and our customers pay for this water.
So we'll circle back to talking about all the good reasons that are out there for actually leaving the island and evacuating. But when the water goes to be turned back on, we get the notification from Manatee. And I would say, too, Manatee has been very good about telling us in advance when they're going to at least give us a range of when they're going to schedule a turnoff, because we can fill our ground storage tanks and we can make sure that we have at least the maximum amount of water on the island.
Yes.
But that's it. Once they turn the water off, there is no other source.
That's right.
So once we have the water turned back on, are there boil water notices? Are there things that then also kind of slow kind of a regular resumption of water use?
Yes, thank you, Tip. Typically, when you depressurize a system and repressurize it, you have to go through at least a 48-hour period, a series of water sampling exercises, and then report that to the state of Florida before you can actually clear the water for normal drinking. And so what we do is we and the county and anybody else that depressurizes their system has to notify their residents that they're under a boil water advisory. And that boil water advisory will be in place for a period of time until those sampling events are not only taken, but are approved, and we clear those sampling events. So there is a whole process before we get back to normal drinking of the water. And so the town would be under a boil water advisory after an event where the water shut off.
So one of the keys to being able to boil water is power.
Electricity.
Yeah, power. And so one of the things, so let's talk about all the good reasons, and I'm looking at you, but I'm talking to them, about when we are asking folks to evacuate, please do so. So one of it is, if you're here, you're using the water that is really meant for firefighting. That's why the water's in those storage tanks. That's all we have. That's a very limited supply. There really isn't another option. So the water's not for you. You might be here using it. Then we get the boil water notice. We could be in a storm event, as we've experienced, whether we have undergrounding or not. You could lose power. That means you can't boil the water. That means you're then coming to the town saying, hey, please give me some bottled water. I need some. All of these are extra strains on all the other services that we're trying to do just to get our assessments done, making sure that the systems have integrity and that everything's safe. The roads are open, all of these different things. And so people leaving the island when we say, please evacuate, is critical.
It's very important. And going back to the electrical piece, not only does the water system have those protocols and you need electricity to boil water, but our entire sewer collection system is operated by electricity. Nobody wants raw sewage backing up in their home after a storm. You don't want to be in that. It's not healthy. It's not healthy. It's not safe. But our entire system is dependent on pumps to collect the wastewater and move it down the line. If we lose power, there's no guarantees that we can get those pumps operational to move that sewage down the line. We do a lot of work to move generators and do things, but that's a key aspect of our infrastructure that we also have to assess and see where we're at with. Can we get the sewer system back operational after an event? After Hurricane Irma, for example, Tip, probably 85 to 90% of our lift stations were down without power on the initial after the impact. We did work very hard to get them back up and running, but that's something that people should probably think about.
Yeah, takes a day or two or longer to make sure. And again, we're checking the systems at the same time. It's not just powering it up. It's, hey, is everything okay? Because the last thing, as you mentioned, we want to see is a wastewater spill.
That's right.
So we do the evacuation orders. We ask people to leave in advance of the storm because there's likely not to be water, potentially not to be power. And that these things in a real strong event take a while to restore. And so you're going to be sitting, when do these storms hit? When it's cold in wintertime? No. When it's August, September, October, it's hot, it's humid, and people are seeking relief then from the heat. There isn't any, right? There's no power. And so all the more reason why you want to get off the island. There's no reason to stay. So please, when we have an evacuation order, please heed it. Please make sure that you've got your plan, you're ready to go. You know where you're going. You don't have to evacuate 200 miles away. All you need to really do is maybe get on the east side of 75. For most storms, that's going to be enough. And then just allow everybody that is part of our first response to check the systems, make sure the streets are clear, make sure we've got power, make sure we've got water, kind of getting things restored before we start coming back. So that's real important. So one of the things that we want to talk about is how do you know this information? How does it come to you during an event like this? And Alert Longboat Key is really our one-stop shop for being notified of critical, especially weather-related, storm-related events. And you're going to see below here where you can sign up for that. You'll have that information. It's critical that if you're a resident of Longboat Key, you are signed up. I think we've got over 16,000 people. If you're not one of them, if you haven't received a notice, a text here in the last, say, 6 months from us, you probably fell off the list somehow. So you need to register. So go to, look at the information below, go to our website, and let's make sure you get signed up. If you have been receiving notices, you don't need to do anything. You're already registered, everything's good. So that's the first piece. Alert Longboat Key for the significant, really strong weather events or other large events that we might have. That's where you get your news from. It will direct you to our website, which is also going to be updated with the most recent information. For the smaller things, like we may have some water outages, a contractor breaks a line in certain areas, or we might have a gas line break on GMD, or maybe there's a traffic issue on one of the bridges. We also do an e-notification service. And that's also a sign-up, so I'm going to have that below here as well. And if you can sign up for that, these are things that are not true emergencies. These are things that are on the next tier down, informational, but also helpful in your daily lives as to whether or not you want to travel that way off the island or maybe coming back. So we want to make sure that everybody is as notified as we can so that you can make the best decisions for yourself and what your agenda is for that day. So, you know, we ask people to evacuate. We want to make sure that they're staying informed. Alert Longboat Key e-notifications are two great ways to get this information specific to Longboat Key. You'll hear other things in the news, and watching the news is critical, but they're also covering the rest of the counties and the rest of our region. If you want something specific to Longboat, Alert Longboat Key and e-notifications from the town of Longboat Key are the way to go. So Isaac, I think we've covered it. I think, you know, people have heard this many times before, but hopefully with the hyperactive storm forecast that we have for this year, we'll get 100% compliance if we get into a situation where we're needing to evacuate. And that allows everybody here at the town and everybody who's a first responder to be able to do their job.
That would be great.
Yeah. So thank you for all you do. We appreciate it. Now, you and your team do an amazing job all the time for us, so we appreciate that.
Really appreciate it, too.
That's it for this Tip Talk. We appreciate you tuning in. Until next time, be well.